What is up, BookTube? It is Monty, and today we are finally here to discuss the long-awaited A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. Now, we're gonna set this. Sorry, Dan. We're gonna set that up there. We're gonna talk about it, and I need to preface this because talking about Court of Silver Flames, I think, is going to be a teensy bit difficult, personally for me, because one, it's Nesta's book, and two, I think that what we need to know before we even go into like spoilers or discussion of the plot is if you have never a day in your life liked Nesta, I don't know how much you are going to get out of this. Like, I don't know if this will ever rise above like a 3-star read, and I don't know if it would be worth running out to purchase this if you don't have like a library near you, because it's a Sarah J. Maas, like I'm going to assume that a library is going to have it. So if like a library is completely unavailable and you've never liked Nesta a day in your life, I do think that it is very easy to skip over this, because a lot of what the book has to offer, I don't know how much we're going to have to gain from it. Now, I'm going to try and spend the bulk of this review talking about it, but I do think that A Court of Silver Flames is a hard book to discuss, in that while there is a plot and there are things that happen, I do think that this very much reads like the book that Sarah J. Maas has said a couple of times in interviews that it started out as. So in an Instagram live that I believe is still up over on her Instagram page, and in the talk she did as part of the book tour for the tour editions, she talks about how when she started A Court of Silver Flames, she had finished Akamath, she was doing edits on Akawar, and she would kind of go into her office after doing, the work for her contracted book with her glass of wine or her Coca-Cola, whatever, and she would write A Court of Silver Flames. Like, it was just fun for her. Like, she knew where the story wanted to go and she wanted to be able to write it. But this very much is like an author spending time with these characters that they've grown with, that they think that there is something there for. And A Court of Silver Flames definitely reads like that author doing that. And because A Court of Silver Flames, I wouldn't call it detached. It is very firmly set in this period of time after A Court of Frost and Starlight, after A Court of Wings and Ruin, that you can't just jump in here. I would think, you could if you had like zero interest in anything that happened with Highburn, but I don't know if rewarding is the right word, but I don't think that Nesta is particularly the vehicle in which I would want to be introduced to Prithian if I had no idea what was going on. Like, it wasn't that it would be confusing, it would just be, I don't know if this is an entry point for most people, because I think Nesta's appeal is to such a very specific niche audience that, again, I don't understand some of the choices that were made here. So as for what the story of A Court of Silver Flames is, we have Nesta and Cassian, and the start of the book would I say you have to read A Court of Frost and Starlight to read this? No, but I do think that A Court of Frost and Starlight does actually set this up, even though it also very quickly eliminates all of the plot that A Court of Frost and Starlight set up. Like, the entire Illyrian rebellion just kind of like winks out of existence within 3 seconds of A Court of Silver Flames. So that was kind of upsetting, because I thought the Illyrian rebellion could be an interesting little plot point, and instead we're going to have some kind of like human fairy disruption, which even that I think isn't going to be all that interesting over the course of interconnected standalones, but maybe Sarah will prove me wrong. But following the events of, that solstice in A Court of Frost and Starlight, Feyre and Rhysand and everybody else gets together and they're like, Nesta, you got to stop this, because at this point in her life, Nesta is surviving solely on wine and dick. Like, she occasionally eats a little snacky snack here and there, but sis is only eating dick regularly. And they're like, we just can't have this for you. Like, we refuse to do this, so you can either go to the house on the House of the Wind or whatever, or you have to go back to the human lands. Like, we're just gonna exile you. And Nesta has very little interest in either option, but she realizes that as a high fae in the human lands, that would not go particularly well for her. And so she chooses to go to the house up on the hill next to like the little, you know, the 10,000 steps or whatever. And there she goes with Cassian to train and to just kind of like rehabilitate herself. She's not really interested in that at the beginning of the story. And I think that this book really does a great job of setting up, like, when you care about somebody, the people in their lives cannot force them to be better. They cannot force them to better themselves, to clean themselves up. Like, that really has to come from the person. And so we get to see Nesta go on that journey by herself. In my tweets and in my Goodreads review, I talk about how I don't see A Court of Silver Flames as a sort of atonement story or as a redemption arc for Nesta, because it really isn't those things. I think that you can point to actions that she does for other people. There are redemptive moments, and I think that the journey that Nesta goes on for herself facilitates her doing things that are now in the interests of other people in a way that she wasn't really doing before. Before, Nesta was really only interested in protecting Elaine, but when she perceives that Elaine has like kind of abandoned her and chosen favor over her, then Nesta's like kind of just out here adrift on her own, like not understanding like where she fits in, how she fits in, not really feeling deserving of any kind of love or affection. And she is just kind of very much intentionally having people at a distance. And I thought that was, I don't know if I would call it relatable for me personally, but I did think that it was a compelling narrative. I do think that a lot of people, again, if you don't like Nesta, reading her talk about keeping all of these people at a distance and purposefully making these decisions that she knows are going to hurt those around her while also feeling isolated, that's not going to be, like, that's not set up to be a very sympathetic character moment. And again, this is a thing that Sarah J. Maas touched on in the author talk, where she didn't want Nesta to be sympathetic at the beginning of the book. And I don't know if Nesta really ever gets to a point of being a sympathetic protagonist. Like, I do think that this is not a book that is going to change your mind about her, because even in the moments where she is growing as an individual and doing these things that are bettering herself, I do think that when I was reading it, there were these moments that were happening, and I was like, yeah, the girlies aren't going to be happy with this. Like, they're not going to be happy that, you know, Nesta got her start just sitting in this cottage watching her family, like, just fall apart. And now she's doing all of these things that she wasn't doing then, and she's forming these connections with these other women that she didn't form with her sisters. But I thought that was just really, I thought that was an interesting experience to watch Nesta go through when she was finding this sisterhood with these other women that she didn't initially have with her own sisters, and then taking that same energy to her. Like, it was just a beautiful little arc, a beautiful moment, because these were the people who they didn't have any preconceived notions of who Nesta was. You know, they did not grow up with Nesta. They were able to come into Nesta's life, see where she was in this moment, be there for her in the same way that, and it's not to say that like Feyre and Elaine haven't been there for her, but there isn't that complication of the past that you also have to deal with Emery and Gwen. Emery and Gwen were some of the highlights of this book. I thought they were really excellently done. I thought that they really added a lot to the story. I loved both of them a whole lot. And so seeing Nesta get to bond with Emery and Gwen, I thought was really great. And then getting to see Emery and Gwen also go on their own journeys throughout the course of the book was also just chef's kiss, a beautiful, beautiful moment. And then to see that come full circle at the end, again, was just a lovely, lovely addition. Now, A Court of Silver Flames is definitely the book, I think, that before I read any Sarah J. Maas last year, I've since read just about everything she's written aside from Catwoman and that Tumblr blog she ran with Suzerain Detter. Like, other than those two little things, I've read the canon of Sarah J. Maas, and before I read it, people were saying that her books were like the sluttiest, smutty Smutsersons on Smutterson Avenue. And I do think that A Quarter of Silver Flames is that book. But I do think that it is actually Sarah's smuttiest book, which she has said a couple of times in various places at various moments. This is the sexiest book that Sarah J. Maas has ever written. It definitely comes across on the page. There were moments where as a gay man watching these two heterosexual people out here fucking, there were moments where I chuckled. You know, I thought that it was a little extreme. It was almost like Sarah was sitting in her office and she was like, y'all think I'm some like harlot, let me write the Smutterson the way that y'all think I've been writing the Smutterson. And it felt like a little over the top. It felt like it was a little dramatic. Like when she was out here describing Cassian's cock as it was enormous. It was the biggest thing she'd ever seen. It was enormous. Like, enormous was in the sentence twice. That wasn't just, like, that's how enormous Cassian's dick is. He has the biggest fairy dick in all of fairyland, apparently. So, love that for Cassian. Hate that for Nesta. There was a moment where Nesta went to go blow him, and she was like, I don't think I can fit this in my mouth. And then she was like, you know what? I want you to throat fuck me. So, like, we were just going all over the place with Cassian's dick, and I love that for Cassian. Love that for Nesta. But there were definitely moments for me where I didn't diminish the sex scene for me. If anything, it made me enjoy the moment more. Like, it heightened the enjoyment that I personally had. But his dick makes several appearances. Nesta is constantly masturbating, and it was just a lot of orgasms. And I love that for them, because there is an actual plot wherein Nesta there are these objects that are important, they're significant, they are old, and they're the old human queen. I forget which one it was, but the old one who like got turned into a crone. She out there trying to manipulate the situation, trying to, you know, redo some shit. And so we have to stop her. And it is a standalone, so, you know, these objects come into play in a way that is significant to the plot, in a way that I thought was really interesting. And then we do have moments, it is Nesta's book, where we do get Cassian's perspective as a love interest. So his story arc is really more about those objects. It's really more about him trying to connect with Nesta. It's really, I don't want to say he also has a growth arc. Like, his is a much more like straightforward, like his storyline is more central to the plot. And through Cassian is where we get pieces of like Reese and Feyre, because, you know, Feyre's still pregnant, which we found out in A Quarter Frost and Starlight. And that's a complication that we have to, I think it might have been Aka War. I don't think it was. I think that was Frost and Starlight. I don't remember. It's been a minute. I read those in like December, so apologies. But she's, you know, dealing with her pregnancy, which I said there are some complications there. There's a whole plot where they are keeping a secret from her. And that's another point of contention I think people are going to have with this book, because Nesta decides that maybe we should not be keeping that particular secret. And it is a way for her to hurt Feyre, definitely. But she is also, in this moment, being hurt. And so, you know, I'm not going to justify everything that Nesta has ever done in her life. To me, I think that everyone experiences their trauma. I don't want to say, like, they experience their trauma differently and they react in different ways, but, like, I don't expect Nesta, at the point in which she finds this out, and the point in which, you know, at the point that because there's also a secret they've been keeping from Nesta that revolves around the plot, kind of. And so, at that point in the narrative, she had been showing improvements, we'll say. Like, again, I don't think this is a redemption story. I don't think it's like an atonement arc, but she had been steadily working toward this thing, steadily, you know, agreeing to be slightly more agreeable, let's say. And so for her, it really, like, there's an argument in like, okay, but you're still a bitch, like, you've been a bitch, and so the idea that these people would not trust you is because you're a bitch. It kind of like, for me, it falls flat in that particular moment because she had been taking these steps, she had been doing these things to show that like, hey, y'all wanted me to do this, I'm doing the thing you asked me to do. Clearly we are all working toward some kind of common ground here. And so for that, it was kind of like a punch in her gut. It's like, you know, you can make these improvements, you can do these things, but to this group of people, nothing that you do will matter. You really are that worthless person that you thought you were. And so it's easy for Nesta in that moment to lash out at Feyre and reveal this thing that they were keeping from her, which I do think they should not have been keeping from Feyre. Like, I just need that. I need, like regardless of whether or not, you know, Nesta agreed initially to help keep it a secret from Feyre, or she had never known and she's kind of stumbled upon it. I do, and regardless of whether Nesta was hurt or she wasn't hurt in the moment in which she reveals it, I think that what they were hiding from Feyre was really disgusting. Like, that was just, Sarah J. Maas, these are, again, like, Rhys-Stan the garbage man. Rhys-Stan the garbage man. So, like, the what he knew and what he was hiding from Feyre, I thought was honestly unforgivable. Like, and you can argue that, like, if that happened to Feyre, it would also happen to Rhys-Stan, and you can have that conversation if you want. But I think that first of all, I thought it was a weird complication that didn't make any sense. But again, whatever. I do think that secret was not something that should have been kept from Feyre, and Feyre needed to have that information if she was going to continue to do this thing, because I don't think that the outcome would have been different if she had known from the beginning or when she found out. But I do think that her not knowing led to her to have a severe lack of options by the time that she did find out. So there is that. I also will say that I think that while this is very clearly Nesta and Cassian's story and their arc, and we do, like I said, we get Feyre, we get Rhys-Stan, Elaine makes like 4 appearances, Asriel pops in and pops out doing his little like spy master shit. It is a standalone and more condensed, not condensed, it is more contained than I anticipated it would be going in. I think that a Gwen, this is not fucking Eye of the World, Gwen and Emery were the 2 characters that were like brought into the narrative, and they did serve a purpose. Like, they brought in the world, they were able to bring in you know, more traditions, all these other things into and it made Prithian, I felt, a more vibrant place. It felt a little less cold to me. It felt more immersive. And again, like, you had to do something with 751 pages. So I'm happy that we had those additions. But at the same time, I did think that I don't know if I would have enjoyed it more. I do think I would have enjoyed it more if it had been edited. And that's saying it as somebody who gave it 5 stars. I think that there were a lot of moments where I could understand like why we would go back to a scene and why we would revisit it, especially in the context of like what was happening. But there were scenes that I felt that went on for maybe a little bit too long, or they were too many of a similar type of scene so close together, particularly in the first third of the book. Like, the first 200-ish pages I felt they teetered on the repetitive side of life. And I think that maybe we could have eliminated some of those, and we could have had a book closer. I don't know if I would say, but I don't know if it would really drastically change the page numbers, but I think that we could have pared it back some in some places. I do think that the book did a really good job of setting things up and foreshadowing what was to come, because even in those, you know, couple hundred pages at the beginning, there were things I was like, okay, so we're gonna do this in this book. Like, this is what we're gonna do. And I found myself really looking forward to that thing that Sarah set up. And even though at the end, she did kind of subvert it a little bit. She subverted it in a way where it felt organic to the story, and I did not feel like, oh, we're on some fuck shit. And I appreciate that, I think, the most. I think that maybe it's because her other books are not standalones. They are so interconnected upon each other that, like, you can't they just function differently. So to see A Court of Silver Flames work so beautifully as a standalone, I thought was just, I appreciated it a lot. I do think that there's still a barrier between the reader and Nesta, but I think that we finally get a better understanding of these things. We finally get a better understanding that of who she is. So like, that's fair, that's valid, y'all can do all of that if you want, but I did appreciate seeing it from Nesta. We got to see the, not everything, but the moments that I found truly connected me with her through her eyes. Like, I thought it was really, I guess this is kind of a spoiler, but we all, if you've read the series, you know that Nesta and her father, she did not fuck with that man. And so I think that for a lot of the book, her being really stuck on the trauma of watching her father die is, from what I've only talked to Monet about this, and Monet and I do not agree about the rating of this book. I really enjoyed it. She enjoyed Cassian. She still wants Nesta to jump off a cliff, which Monet gonna feel that way. But for me, I think that the beauty of this book was understanding that Nesta and her father did not get along, but watching him, like, she watched this man, you know, lose all of his money to those debtors. She watched him lay in that cot by the fire, not doing anything. She watched her youngest sister go out into the woods and like hunt and do all of these things, and her father still just sat there doing nothing. And then when Elaine and Nesta were kidnapped by the cauldron and they were forced into the cauldron, and then the war broke out, she saw her father, who had been doing nothing for like a decade, raise an army to come and like save her, to help her. And then in that moment where she feels like she could have done something more, and y'all can fight about whether she could have done something or whether she couldn't have done something, like, that's not, to me, that's not the point of the argument. The point of the argument isn't could Ness have done something. The point of the argument is she feels like she could have done something, and instead she had to like watch as her father died. And so all she hears is like that snapping neck, and it's just, Nesta, it's just, again, like, this book, I thought, it hit everything that I needed it to hit, and it did it on every page. Like, yes, we could have edited. Yes, we can have that talk. I'm open to the book being shorter. But I'm also, you know, when I think about it through the lens of like Sarah J. Maas sat down in her office and wrote this for her, and to connect with these characters that she thought could still have a story. I think that that's what A Court of Silver Flames does. And so when I look at it at that lens, and maybe that's not fair because I don't look at every book in that same, like, how did the author intend for me to interpret it? But for once, I think Sarah and I align. Okay, so like what the author wanted and what I wanted and what I delivered, like, they all came together in that perfect trinity of things where looking at it through that lens is how I want to look at it and how the book delivers. So for me, like I said, 5 out of 5 stars. I think that a lot of what this book does is really excellent, just really masterfully well done. So yeah, I think that if you are a Nesta person, you are going to enjoy this. If you enjoy Cassian, you're going to enjoy it. But if you have wanted Nesta to have her head ripped from her body, this is not gonna, like, it's a fantasy romance in the most romantic or erotic sense of fantasy romance, where there is a plot, but we are quite a bit. So it's odd for me to recommend this book to people because I do think that the audience for this particular installment is so narrow, and I don't think there's any, like I said at the beginning, I don't think there's any reason to rush out and purchase. So if you can get it from your library, get it from your library. Wait until you get like a gift card and you have a little, I don't know, but that's where I am. If you made it this far into the video, let's leave this emoji down in the comment section below. I look forward to talking with you all down there. The book's been out for, it's almost a week. Hopefully this is going out tomorrow on a Monday, so it'll almost be a week since release day. I know several people have finished it, so maybe we'll have a discussion down there, but if not, you can just tell me if you are going to read it, or if you have no plans to. But I'll see you guys again soon with another video, but until then, and until next time.